Great sales process. Terrible delivery. Everyone was helpful until I paid. They promised 5 days, it took 3 weeks. Those 3 reviews were written about the same company in the same month. That month, sales were up 30%, complaints were up 5 times, and the leadership team was still calling the growth strategy a success. The company is called Meridian. 1,000 customers a month. A competitive offer. Real demand in the market. 90 days earlier, leadership made the decision almost every company eventually makes: increase monthly sales by 30%. Marketing got a larger budget. Sales got higher targets and new incentives. The CRM was automated. An AI assistant was added to the site to qualify leads and answer questions before a human ever picked up. Checkout got faster. On paper, the plan was disciplined. It had a target, a timeline, a budget, an owner, and a dashboard. 6 weeks later, the dashboard turned green. Traffic up, qualified leads up, orders up 30%. Revenue almost exactly where leadership expected it to be. The strategy worked. Then the consequences began to arrive. Delivery times slipped, support tickets doubled, refund requests rose. Leadership looked at the same dashboard that had looked so good a month earlier. Sales were still up, but satisfaction was falling. Operations was exhausted, support was apologizing for promises it had never made, and sales was still being rewarded for adding volume. Look again at that 90-day plan, and one thing becomes visible. Almost every item on it stops at the moment the customer says yes. More leads, better scripts, faster checkout, automated follow-up. No one mapped what happens after the sale. No one tested whether onboarding, scheduling, delivery, billing, refunds, or service recovery could absorb 30% more volume. And no one asked the front line what would break first. Because growth is rarely just a marketing problem. Leadership defines the target, marketing generates demand, sales closes the customer. But someone still has to onboard, schedule, produce, deliver, support, correct, refund, and rescue the relationship when something goes wrong. Most companies automate the beginning of that journey and leave the rest of it running on spreadsheets, inboxes, approvals, and people who are already at capacity. The sales system scales, the operating system does not. Meridian had a sales plan. It did not have a growth strategy. Every strategy creates a counter strategy. The strategy itself is easy to understand. More leads create more opportunities. More opportunities create more sales. More sales create more revenue. So leadership invests in the part of the system that creates demand: advertising, lead capture, email sequences, sales reminders, proposals, payment collection, and increasingly an AI agent sitting at the front of all of it. The front end does get faster. A customer can discover the company in the morning, talk to sales in the afternoon, and buy before the end of the day. That is progress. It genuinely is. But it creates an illusion. Because buying became faster, leadership assumes the company became more scalable. It did not. One part of the company became more scalable. After the sale, the customer enters a different company. Onboarding depends on a spreadsheet. Delivery depends on manual scheduling. Billing corrections depend on email questions moved between departments. Refunds need a manager, and nobody owns the customer from the first problem to the last one. This is not a Meridian problem. Forrester expects roughly one company in three to damage its customer experience this year with self-service automation deployed too early, in situations where it was never going to work. The front end scales. The back end absorbs the damage. Then, the organization begins to react. Not intentionally. Systems do not need intentions to produce consequences. Sales responds to the incentive it was given: close more deals. Marketing responds to the metric it was given: generate more qualified leads. Operations responds to the pressure it receives: deliver as much as possible, even if workarounds become normal. Support responds by protecting response time: close tickets fast, even when the underlying problem stays open. Finance sees revenue rising and assumes the plan is working. Every one of those departments is behaving rationally, and the company is getting worse. This is the counter strategy the growth plan created. Sales promises speed, because speed converts. Operations quietly extends deadlines because capacity is finite. Support offers explanations because it has no authority to offer solutions. Managers invent exceptions because the normal process no longer works. Customers experience the gaps between those decisions. Leadership announced one strategy. The organization wrote several informal ones in order to survive it. And that is the part leadership almost never sees, because none of it is written down anywhere. It exists only in the workarounds. Now look at what all of this does to the money. The figures are illustrative. The pattern is not. Before the campaign, Meridian handles 1,000 orders a month at an average order value of $100. Monthly revenue, $100,000. After direct labor, fulfillment, payment fees, and variable costs, each order contributes $35. That is, $35,000 of contribution. The normal failure rate is 4%. 40 orders a month need rework, credits, or extra support at about $20 each. $800. Adjusted contribution, $34,200. Now the campaign works. Orders rise to 1,300. Revenue rises to 130,000. Contribution appears to rise to 45,500. That is what the sales dashboard sees, but the operation is overloaded. The failure rate goes from 4% to 15%. 195 orders now need rescuing, 5 times as many as before, and each one costs more because people are on overtime. Customers want compensation, and managers are pulled into exceptions. $35 each, $6,825. Then add the customers who do not come back, cancellations, non-renewals, warnings to other buyers. Call it $3,600 of future contribution, gone. Adjusted contribution after growth, $35,075. Revenue up 30%. Real contribution up 2.5%. And there is one number nobody looked at. Before growth, Meridian earned $34.20 of adjusted contribution on every order. After growth, it earned $26.98. The company sold 300 more orders a month and made 21% less on every single one of them. And this model is generous. It holds unit economics constant. In practice, overtime, expedited shipping, and the discounts you hand out to keep angry customers all compress that $35 too. The real number is worse. The growth plan did not fail. It hit its target. The target was incomplete, because the first order effect is easy to see. More marketing, more demand, more sales, more revenue. The second order effects arrive later, and they compound. More customers create more handoffs create more errors create more support creates slower response creates frustration creates negative reviews create hesitation, and hesitation raises the cost of the next sale. The next buyer reads more, compares more, asks for guarantees, questions the delivery date, requests references, delays, or asks for a discount to compensate for a risk they now perceive. The strategy was designed to remove friction before the purchase. Execution created a new kind of friction after it. Meridian created demand. Then it created resistance to its own demand. This is not only an operations problem. It is a leadership design problem. When leadership announces a growth target, the organization needs more than a number. It needs context. Why are we growing? Which customers are we trying to attract? What are salespeople authorized to promise? What must not be sacrificed? Where can the front line decide on its own? When should a case be escalated? Which metric wins when revenue conflicts with quality? Without answers, employees improvise. And improvisation becomes the real operating model. Leadership usually notices something is wrong and says, "We need people to take ownership." But ownership without authority is just responsibility for a problem someone else has to approve. A support agent understands the customer situation but cannot issue a credit. A salesperson identifies a special requirement but cannot confirm operations can meet it. An operations manager watches the same failure repeat but cannot slow sales down or change the offer. Everyone sees part of the problem. Nobody has the authority to protect the whole customer experience. And the opposite fails too. Unlimited autonomy produces inconsistent discounts, expensive exceptions, impossible promises, and compliance risk. So the answer is not control, and it is not empowerment. It is bounded empowerment, authority with limits. In practice, that looks specific. A frontline employee can issue a credit up to $100 with no approval. Between 100 and 500, a supervisor decides. Above 500, it escalates. The person who received the complaint stays responsible for that customer until it is resolved, even when another team does the work. Every exception is logged, and every week, leadership reviews the reasons, not just the amounts. Delegation without authority creates frustration. Authority without guardrails creates inconsistency because the customer does not experience departments. The customer experiences one company. They do not care that marketing made the promise, sales entered the wrong date, operations had no capacity, and finance delayed the refund. To them, the company promised and the company failed. So there are always two problems to solve: the customer's immediate problem and the organizational problem that produced it. That takes a recovery process. 6 steps. Acknowledge, without arguing with the customer's perception. Assign one owner, resolve the immediate issue, explain what changed, confirm the fix actually worked, and return the lesson to the system. A complaint should not disappear when the ticket closes. It should become information for leadership, sales, operations, product, and finance. A closed ticket is not the same thing as a solved system. So, how does a company grow without turning every new sale into new operational risk? 6 questions. Growth. G. Goal with a quality floor. Do not define growth with revenue alone. State the objective and the minimum performance you refuse to trade away. Revenue up 30%. On-time delivery above 95%. Refunds below 3%. First response within 4 hours. Contribution margin above a floor you name out loud. Growth without a quality floor is permission to sell the future in order to make the month. And look back at what actually happened to Meridian. Every dollar that growth destroyed came from one number moving: the failure rate. A quality floor is simply the decision to treat that number as a constraint you set in advance instead of a result you find out about afterwards. R. Readiness before demand. Do not ask whether you are ready. Assume you already got everything you asked for, every lead, every order, every account, and then walk the company and find what breaks. People, capacity, inventory, technology, cash, suppliers, onboarding, support, billing, recovery. You are not looking for a yes, you are looking for the first cue. O. Ownership at the edge. Decide who can solve problems where they happen. Define authority, limits, escalation, and a single owner for the customer. W. Workflow alignment. A strategy is not aligned because every department attended the presentation. It is aligned when promises, capacity, information, and accountability travel the whole journey together. T. Truth from the customer. The earliest warning rarely appears on the executive dashboard. It appears in the sentence customers keep repeating. H. Heal and learn. Recover the customer. Then correct the system. If the same failure comes back, the company did not learn. It apologized. The pattern travels. A restaurant fills every table and the kitchen cannot hold its quality. A software company closes more accounts while onboarding is still manual, so the customers it wins never activate. A gym sells memberships until the classes are full and the equipment is taken. An accounting firm wins clients faster than it can collect their documents. An e-commerce brand drives orders against inventory data that is wrong. Different industries, same sequence. Invest in demand before preparing delivery, and the sales system becomes more efficient than the operating system. So go back to Meridian's dashboard. Sales up 30%. Complaints up 5 times. Contribution per order down 21%. Was the strategy successful? If the goal was revenue this quarter, arguably, yes. If the goal was profitable, repeatable, trusted growth, no. Which metric are you willing to improve? And which value are you unwilling to damage? Every growth decision hides a trade-off: speed or control, volume or attention, automation or judgment, acquisition or retention, revenue this quarter or trust next year. There is no strategy without a trade-off, but the trade-off should be chosen, not discovered through customer complaints. Meridian's mistake was not pursuing growth. It was treating growth as something the sales team could deliver alone. A growth plan creates demand. A growth strategy prepares the company to keep the promise at a higher volume. So before you raise the next target, ask one question. If the strategy works, is the rest of the company ready for the consequences? Every business decision has another side.